You sure you can even see the target, Grandma? The young recruit laughed. Others followed. They chuckled at her rifle, old, scratched, wrapped in cloth. One even whispered, "This ain't bingo night." But she didn't flinch. She simply knelt, adjusted the wind with her hand, and loaded one round. Slow, precise. No words, no glare, just quiet certainty. They said she was too old to hold a rifle, that her eyes were too tired, that her hands were too shaky. But when the drone zoomed in, they saw the impossible, a target shattered from nearly 2 miles away. No scope, no assistant, just a woman they all dismissed, until she pulled the trigger. Her name was Eleanor Wade, 68 years old. She lived alone in a weather-beaten wooden cabin tucked into the hills east of the competition range, not far from the national forest but far enough from people. The kind of place where the wind sounded like distant memories and the walls groaned like they were trying to forget something. The locals didn't know much about her. A few called her the widow in the hills. Others simply referred to her as that rifle lady, thanks to the rare occasions someone spotted her carrying a long canvas bundle down to the river. No one knew who she used to be. No one knew she had once held the record for the longest confirmed combat shot in U.S. history. A single bullet fired from the edge of a ridge in a war zone no one talks about, through dust storms and chaos, to save an entire platoon that had been left behind. No one knew she had been part of Shadow V, an all-female elite reconnaissance unit so classified that most of its members were never listed in official records. Officially, Eleanor Wade did not exist after 1992. Her service files were redacted, her commendations never publicized, and the very mention of her name in certain internal systems would trigger encryption protocols. All part of a deal she agreed to after her final mission. A deal that let her walk away from war, from orders, and from the consequences of disobeying one. You see, she had disobeyed a direct command. Years ago, during a high-risk withdrawal operation near a foreign border, her unit was ordered to retreat, to leave the wounded behind. Eleanor didn't. She stayed, crawled half a mile through enemy terrain, and set up a one-woman overwatch position with nothing but a battered rifle, her last 8 rounds, and a makeshift wind flag made from a torn sleeve. When the evac finally arrived the next morning, 12 soldiers were alive, because someone disobeyed and didn't miss a single shot. They couldn't court-martial her. They also couldn't promote her. So they erased her, and she let them. Back in the present, no one at the competition range knew any of this. To the crowd, she was just an old woman with a wrapped-up relic of a rifle. They didn't see a legend. They saw a liability, except for one man. Major Grant Holloway, mid-60s, retired infantry, now serving on the board of the Civilian Marksmanship Outreach Committee. He'd been sipping lukewarm coffee in the judge's tent, casually reviewing contestant files for final eligibility when he saw her name, Eleanor Wade. Something about it stirred the dust in his memory. He squinted at the entry. No branch listed, no background, no digital record. A printed signature and an old paper form with a faded stamp marked, "Cleared for participation by discretion." That stamp, he hadn't seen it in years. Grant's hands froze. He tapped the file. Eleanor Wade. Ghost Eye? He whispered under his breath. Could it be? No. Ghost Eye had disappeared after the '92 incident. Just vanished. Rumors claimed she had died in exile, defected, or was living in Alaska. But here she was, with that same old rifle. He stood at the edge of the range, arms crossed, watching her movements. The way she scanned the distance without raising her scope. The way she tested the wind by watching pine needles sway. The way she loaded one round like it was a ritual, not routine. That's not someone learning how to shoot. That's someone who's done it for a lifetime. Grant didn't say anything. He didn't need to. If she was who he thought she was, she'd made her choice to stay hidden. But part of him knew, once she fired that shot, the world would remember her, whether she wanted it or not. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here to remind the win. The sun hung low behind the ridgeline as the opening round of the precision shooting event began. Dust from the transport vehicles still lingered in the air, casting a golden haze across the dry range. Participants, mostly in their 20s and 30s, filed into their respective lanes with practiced swagger, hoisting carbon fiber rifles bristling with attachments. This wasn't just any civilian shooting match. It was an open qualification event sponsored by a veteran outreach foundation and overseen by former military instructors. The prize wasn't just a trophy, it was a direct mentorship slot in the national-level long-range advisory program, often leading to contracts or invitations to assist in law enforcement or security consulting. In other words, big doors. The first challenge, 300 to 700 meters, staggered targets. The announcer called it warm-up distance, but it was still enough to filter the amateurs from the serious contenders. Each shooter had 3 minutes to hit 5 targets at 3 distances. Points were awarded for accuracy, speed, and form. Spectators huddled behind safety fences. Commentators spoke into mics, giving play-by-play, while a drone hovered quietly above, capturing dramatic overhead angles for the event's online livestream. It felt less like a shooting competition and more like a show, and the competitors were here to perform. One by one, shooters took their positions. Most were dressed in modern tactical gear, graphene fiber elbow pads, laser-cut molly rigs, wraparound polarized eyewear. They carried custom rifles worth more than most pickup trucks. They moved with the same rhythm: drop to prone, set bipod, adjust scope, sync smartwatch, check wind meter, confirm with range assistant via earpiece, then fire. Pop, pop, pop. The crowd murmured approvingly. There were some standout performers. A 26-year-old Marine Corps vet named Tyler hit his 5 targets in under 42 seconds. Another contestant, a tech-savvy woman in digital camo, used a laser rangefinder embedded in her rifle stock. Her spotter updated wind data over Bluetooth in real time. Each hit triggered a small flag and a ping on the scoring app. Even the drone tilted slightly during their rounds, closing in for stylish, slow-motion angles. Eleanor Wade had been assigned lane 19, far to the edge of the field, partially shaded by an outcropping of wind-bent trees. No tent, no team, no assistant, just her. Her rifle was an outlier, wooden stock, chipped and rewrapped in what looked like decades-old canvas. No digital optics, no wind meter, no visible comms gear. She didn't even bring a bag. The teenager manning the drone control station glanced at her lane briefly, then redirected the lens back toward the flashy shooters in lanes 6 through 10. "She won't last past round 1, he muttered to the camera operator beside him. And honestly, everyone thought the same. But Eleanor wasn't in a hurry. While others were checking scopes and syncing devices, she sat cross-legged on the ground, holding a blade of dry grass between her fingers. She held it up, not casually but deliberately, watching it twitch in the air. Her eyes followed the tremble at the tip. Then she bent down, scooped up a pinch of dust, and let it fall slowly through her fingers, watching it drift. She made no notes, spoke to no one, but her mind was measuring everything: wind direction, speed, moisture, sun angle, terrain gradient. She stretched her shoulders slowly, no rush, then slid into prone like it was a motion she had done 1,000 times. No flourish, just pure efficiency. When it was Eleanor's turn, the announcer hesitated a moment, then dryly stated, "Lane 19, Eleanor Wade, shooters ready." No one paid much attention. The timer beeped. She didn't rush to load her first round. She blinked slowly, adjusted the rear sight by feel alone, then steadied her breath. Her right hand slipped to the bolt and moved with precision honed by decades. The old rifle cracked once. No echo. Just a flat sound that barely registered over the commentary chatter. Target 1 hit dead center. Second shot came 11 seconds later. Another bullseye. By the third, the spectators near lane 18 had started turning their heads. The rifle wasn't fast, but it was accurate, unreasonably accurate. By the time she hit the 5th target, there was no expression on her face. She simply turned her head slightly toward the range official, then stood up slowly. No celebration, no fist pump. She just dusted her pants and stepped back. The scoring board flickered. Lane 19, 5-5 hits, 100% accuracy time. 1 minute, 47 seconds. People began to murmur. One of the younger competitors leaned toward another and asked, "Who is she again?" "Just some civilian. Maybe a coach." came the dismissive reply. But further down the field, Major Holloway watched silently, arms crossed. He hadn't taken his eyes off her since she laid down. And when that fifth shot rang out, he didn't nod, didn't clap. He just narrowed his eyes and muttered, "She's not here to win. She's here to remind someone." The final round was designed to separate instinct from programming, the shooter from the system. It was known simply as the ghost shot. No digital markers, no standard distances, no rangefinders. The announcer explained it over the loudspeaker, his voice echoing across the field. Final challenge, one round, one target, hidden somewhere between 1.5 and 2.1 miles from your position. No scope recalibration, no spotter. You find it, you hit it, or you go home. A murmur rolled through the competitors. Even the confident ones flinched slightly. At that distance, bullet drop, wind drift, humidity, and mirage all worked against you. And without a fixed coordinate, it became more of a hunt than a shot. The range crew had placed the target, a white metal plate the size of a backpack, somewhere along a ridgeline hidden by terrain folds and low brush. From the shooting line, it wasn't visible to the naked eye unless you knew exactly what to look for. One by one, the top 5 competitors stepped forward. The first shooter, a veteran from Utah with a top-of-the-line .338 Lapua, scanned with his digital monocular, adjusted 3 dials on his optic, and fired. The bullet hit 3 feet wide. No point. The second, a young tech protege named Leland, used his assistant's drone feed to guess the target's coordinates. He missed low, barely. The third shooter, a woman named Harper, clipped the edge. Enough to draw applause, but not enough to advance. By the time the fourth and fifth shooters missed entirely, the tension was thick as desert heat. Only one name remained. Lane 19, Eleanor Wade. Eleanor stepped forward slowly. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't excited. She moved like someone returning to a familiar place after a long absence. Someone who didn't come to compete, but to complete something. She laid her rifle down gently. No scope, no assistant, no extra gear. Just the rifle wrapped in old cloth and her own 2 hands. From a nearby tent, the drone operator leaned toward his monitor. "Wait, is she really going to try this with iron sights?" Another tech watching the feed let out a low whistle. "That's suicide. At this distance, without elevation mapping or a spotter?" The drone, previously set to pan across all shooters equally, began to drift closer to Eleanor. Something about her posture demanded attention. She didn't even look through the rifle yet. Instead, she crouched beside it, plucked a blade of dry grass from the dirt, and let it dangle between her fingertips. The grass twisted, slow then fast. She lifted her hand, tested the wind with her wrist, then turned slightly, recalibrating her angle by just a few degrees. There was no calculation device, no spoken word. She looked toward the hills, squinting just enough for the sunlight to graze her cheek. The wind picked up. She adjusted the rifle's front sight, a barely noticeable flick of her calloused fingers, then closed her eyes for a brief moment. The drone zoomed in. Still no shot, still no movement. Just stillness. And then she moved. A single fluid motion, down to prone, bolt closed, cheek against the stock. She did not look through the rear aperture. Instead, she tilted her head just enough to feel the rifle's balance. Her breathing slowed. 3 seconds passed. 5, 10. And then, the shot. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it cut through the range like a whisper that suddenly became a scream. The drone, now hovering directly above Eleanor's lane, tilted sharply, its camera catching the instant of recoil, then whipping away to scan the distant hills. Everyone on the sidelines squinted. There was no sound of impact, no clang, nothing. The crowd waited. The judges stared. And then, on the far ridge, nearly 3 kilometers away, the white plate flickered in the light. A corner broke off. A small puff of dust swirled behind it. A dead center hit. Bullseye. Confirmed by 2 separate camera angles and seismic sensors at the target site. The crowd gasped. Someone in the press tent shouted, "Zoom in! Zoom in!" The drone operator, pale and blinking, adjusted the gimbal. His voice cracked. Did she just eyeball that shot?" All chatter ceased. Even the announcer hesitated before speaking again. His voice, once booming and playful, dropped to a reverent hush. Lane 19, Eleanor Wade, confirmed impact, center mass, distance, 2.03 miles. The judges were speechless. One dropped his clipboard. The scoreboard updated slowly, as if the system itself couldn't quite believe what had happened. Lane 19, one shot, direct hit, range, 3,267 meters. The other shooters stood with mouths slightly open, scopes still in hand, as if frozen mid-thought. Eleanor remained on the ground, hands still resting on the bolt. She didn't stand immediately. She breathed once, slowly, like exhaling an entire lifetime. Then she rose. She didn't celebrate, didn't smile. She simply stood, slung her rifle over her shoulder like it was any other day, and turned to walk back to her position beneath the crooked pine. That was when it happened. Major Grant Holloway, who had remained motionless throughout, stepped forward. He raised his hand to his forehead in a crisp, perfect salute. He did not say a word. Behind him, slowly, the event staff and even a few shooters, uncertain, hesitant, followed suit. Not because they were told to, not because they understood, but because they felt something had just happened that couldn't be explained. The drone feed lingered on Eleanor's silhouette as she walked toward the edge of the range, the sun casting a long shadow behind her. No music, no commentary, just silence and respect. For a moment after the shot, everything on the range just stopped. The wind blew, dust swirled in the afternoon sun, but not a single person moved. Dozens of competitors, spectators, and officials stood frozen, eyes locked on the distant ridge where the target had just shattered. Some still had rifles in hand, scopes half adjusted, fingers still hovering near triggers. What they had just witnessed wasn't a good shot. It was impossible. No scope, no spotter, no telemetry, and from over 2 miles away. The silence cracked only when Eleanor Wade, still lying on the dry, cracked dirt, finally sat up. Calmly, slowly, as if she'd simply completed a routine morning chore. She dusted off her elbows with deliberate care, stood, and looked briefly toward the judge's table. Then she said, almost too soft to hear, "That'll do." She turned to walk off the line, and still, no one spoke. Behind the observation tents, Major Grant Holloway stood completely still. His arms hung by his sides, but his expression had changed. He had known, or at least he had suspected. Now he was sure. The name Eleanor Wade had lived somewhere deep in his memory for years. Too long, perhaps. Like a ghost the Army didn't talk about anymore. He reached into a small leather satchel beside the table, one reserved for VIP files, and pulled out a hard copy folder. A real one. No digital tag. Just thick paper sealed with a faded red stamp. Confidential. Eyes only. He opened it. Inside was a grainy black and white photograph from over 30 years ago. A woman crouched on a ridgeline, hands on an M40 sniper rifle, her face streaked with camo, eyes locked into the scope like she could see through mountains. He didn't need the confirmation, but it was there. Name, Eleanor Wade, alias, Ghost Eye. Rank, First Lieutenant, Shadow V, decommissioned. Status, MIA, voluntary withdrawal, 1992. Commendations, redacted mission file. Operation Dead Silence, classified level Omega. He shut the folder slowly. "I'll be damned," he muttered. Word spread fast. Not officially, no announcement, no broadcast, but organically, like wildfire caught in dry brush. First among the judges, then the press crew, then the younger shooters who'd been chuckling hours earlier, now stood in awkward silence, watching the figure they once dismissed walk back toward the spectator tents. One of them, a man in his early 30s, still holding his scope, shook his head and whispered, "No way. That's her? The Ghost Eye?" Another leaned over, eyes wide. "I thought she was dead, or in hiding, or, I don't know. A myth. You don't myth a shot like that." And then came the salutes. It started with a man in a wheelchair. a Vietnam-era vet wearing a faded navy hat and a pin-covered vest. He rolled forward through the crowd, slowly, until he was a few feet in front of Eleanor as she passed. Without saying a word, he raised his hand to his forehead and held it there. Firm, unwavering. Eleanor paused. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Just for a second. She gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Then came another man, then two more. A former Marine, a retired Army sergeant, a woman in a civilian polo with an old Silver Star tattoo peeking from under her sleeve. One by one, they stepped out of the crowd and gave her the silent salute. They didn't know her personally, but they knew of her. And even if they didn't, they understood the weight of what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just about skill, it was about honor remembered. A group of the younger competitors approached her now, not with the swagger they'd shown earlier, but with unease, like students approaching a teacher they'd mocked before learning who she really was. One of them, the same one who joked, "This ain't bingo night," removed his hat and stepped forward. He was maybe 27, athletic, confident looking, until now. He swallowed hard before speaking. "Ma'am, I didn't know. I'm sorry." Eleanor studied him for a moment, not harshly, but not softly either. Her expression was unreadable. Then slowly she allowed a small smile to touch the edge of her lips. Just barely. "That's the point," she said. "You're not supposed to." The young man nodded once, eyes lowered. She kept walking. People offered to carry her gear. She declined. A military reporter tried to shove a mic in her face, asking, "What's it like to be a legend?" She replied without breaking stride, "Legends are just people someone else remembered. I'm not here for that." When she reached the edge of the camp, she found a wooden bench under a rusted tin awning and sat down with her back to the crowd, rifle resting across her lap. The noise continued behind her. Disbelief, admiration, apologies. But Eleanor was quiet. She had said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done. And now the rest was just noise. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows over the tents and the quiet stretch of dirt where legends had just been made, or perhaps more truthfully, revealed. While most of the crowd still buzzed with conversation and disbelief, a young man from the event's media team approached the bench, where Eleanor Wade sat alone, her rifle resting across her lap like it had always belonged there. He wasn't a soldier, just a cameraman with a press badge and a quiet curiosity. He had captured the shot on the drone feed. He had seen the impossible unfold. And now, standing a few feet from her, he wasn't quite sure what to say. But eventually he found the words. "Ma'am, why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were?" Eleanor didn't look up right away. She was wiping the dust off the bolt of her rifle with a small square of cloth. Not rushed, just careful, as if she were preserving something that still mattered. Then after a few seconds, she answered. Not with bitterness, not with pride, just honesty. "Some records are kept classified," she said quietly. "Some wounds too." The cameraman hesitated, unsure whether to ask more. But Eleanor continued, her voice like worn gravel, steady, low, and carved by time. "It was in '92, she said. "Border conflict. I was assigned overwatch for a recon unit. 8 men, 1 forward observer. They were supposed to be in and out before dawn." She stopped to rewrap the cloth around her rifle's grip. "Command got bad intel. They ran into 2 platoons instead of 1. Radios went down. Air cover pulled back. Orders were to retreat." The cameraman blinked. "But they didn't?" Eleanor shook her head once. "They couldn't, and I wasn't about to leave them." She looked up then, not at the young man, but out toward the ridgeline in the distance. The same kind of ridgeline, perhaps, where she had once laid prone, alone, with wind in her face and lives on the line. "I crawled up a shale slope with 3 mags and an old bolt action. No spotter, no backup. I picked them off one by one until there was no one left shooting back. 8 men made it home because I didn't move for 14 hours. But none of my team came back. My unit was already gone." There was no trace of dramatics in her tone. It wasn't a story she was performing. It was something she had carried, privately, quietly, for decades. They offered me a medal, she added, with a faint shrug, and a gag order. Said it would compromise foreign relations if the report ever surfaced. So I signed the papers, packed my gear, and walked. The cameraman lowered his camera. He wasn't filming anymore. That rifle, he asked gently, it's the same one? Eleanor glanced down at the old weapon in her lap. The wood was dark, scarred, and wrapped with a strip of aged canvas. She ran her hand over it slowly. It belonged to one of them, she said. The youngest, barely 19. He handed it to me the night before the mission. She paused, then added softly, told me, keep this clean. Someday someone will ask who you were. The silence stretched between them like an old friend. Familiar, solemn, necessary. The cameraman didn't say anything more. He just nodded once and stepped away, leaving Eleanor with her memories and her rifle. The last artifact of a war the world had chosen to forget, but which she had never really left behind. They offered her a medal the next day, a polished plaque, a custom-made coin, even a proposal to officially recognize her new world record for the longest confirmed shot with iron sights. Eleanor Wade declined all of it. She didn't do it for a plaque, or a headline, or a name etched into some digital archive that would be lost the next time someone redesigned a website. Records fade, she said simply. Impact doesn't. The drone footage, however, told a story she could no longer keep hidden. It was uploaded that evening, shaky, raw, but unedited. The camera caught the dust, the stillness, the impossible distance, and then the shot. And more importantly, the silence that followed. Within 24 hours, the clip had gone viral. 6.8 million views, 400,000 shares, thousands of comments. Veterans from different wars left stories in the thread. Young sharpshooters posted tributes. Some simply wrote, "I'll never judge quiet people the same again. This woman made me cry over a bullet. Aberforth she didn't shoot to prove, she shot to remind." A week later, Eleanor received a letter. It wasn't from the press, not from a weapons manufacturer or a television producer. It came on heavy cream paper, with an embossed seal at the top. Liberty Ridge Military Academy. The superintendent, Colonel Brian West, had seen the footage. "We'd like to invite you to be an honorary field advisor for our advanced marksmanship cadets," the letter read. "Not because of your aim, but because of what you stood for when you stood up." Eleanor read it in silence, then folded the paper, set it on the table beside her, and went back to cleaning her rifle. She didn't answer for days. When she did, her terms were simple. "I'll come, but I won't talk about records. I won't talk about medals. I'll only teach if I can show them how not to judge a person by what they see." The video ends on a quiet range behind the academy. The camera pans slowly across a group of cadets, young, eager, full of questions they haven't yet learned how to ask. Eleanor stands in front of them. No microphone, no podium, just the same worn jacket, the same rifle, and a handful of dry grass in her weathered fingers. "This," she says, holding up the grass, "is how you read the wind. Not with machines, not with math, with your breath, with your hand, with stillness." She releases the blade into the breeze. It twists, floats, falls. The cadets watch in stunned silence, as if they're witnessing a magic trick. One of them leans to another and whispers, "It's like she's casting a spell." But Eleanor hears him. She smiles faintly. "It's not magic," she says. "It's just experience you didn't bother to notice before." The final shot shows her walking down the line as the cadets lie prone, each trying to feel the wind with open palms. Not one of them looks at their smartwatch. Not one checks a wind meter. They watch the sky, the trees, the grass, and for the first time, really see it. The screen fades to black. Words appear slowly. You don't have to speak loudly to leave an echo. In a world obsessed with recognition, Eleanor Wade reminded us that quiet excellence still matters. She didn't ask for applause. She didn't post about her past. And yet, when the moment came, she showed the world what true experience, earned through time, sacrifice, and silence, really looks like. Her story isn't just about marksmanship. It's about how we see people. In today's fast-moving culture, it's easy to dismiss the elderly, the quiet, or those who don't advertise their value. But what if the wisest voices are the ones who don't speak unless necessary? What if the strongest hands are the ones holding steady after decades? Not in spite of age, but because of it. Eleanor's shot was a reminder that some impacts don't need to be loud to last forever. So we ask you, have you ever misjudged someone based on how they looked? Or been misjudged yourself? Should stories like Eleanor's be taught in schools? Or remembered only by those who live them? And what do you think we're forgetting to value in our society today? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story moved you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who still believes quiet courage deserves to be remembered. Thank you for watching. And above all, thank you to those who served, those who stood in silence, and those who never asked to be seen, but still showed up when it mattered.